Alright, have no fear because Harry Potter's here, and I'm here to teach you some spells because we're about to get some expensive petroleum. So here's what's going on. OPEC, which is a group of very powerful oil-producing countries, have said that they're about to cut their oil production by 2 million barrels of oil per day starting in November. Now, this is bad because even though the US is the #1 oil-producing country in the world, it still uses more than what it makes. So here's some context. The world uses roughly 100 million barrels of oil per day. And out of that 100 million, the US makes about 18.8 million per day, but it also uses about 20.5 million per day. And that means there's a daily deficit of roughly 1.7 million barrels. Now, this means the US has to import and buy its oil on the open market, which means it is highly affected by crude oil prices, and that also affects the US government and of course things like the US consumer sentiment, aka the way we feel. And because OPEC is cutting their production costs is why the price of oil is going way up. This is also why President Joe Biden is asking the Department of Energy to give him access to 10 million barrels of oil from what's called the SPR, the Strategic Petroleum Reserves. This is met with a lot of criticism because on one hand, those 10 million barrels will only buy the US roughly 5 to 6 days worth of price stability, and those oil reserves are now at a 40-year low. Now, there's actually two arguments about this. On one hand, the president justifies this by saying it'll give us global price stability, which is especially useful for countries like Ukraine and the energy crisis going on in Europe. On the other hand, the critics argue that we should not be using the reserves for anything other than emergency cases only and not as a tool for political gain, which looks especially bad considering elections are less than a month away. And the argument is, after November 9th, oil prices will go up anyway, so we should not be using precious reserves to try to win elections. So that's the problem in a nutshell, but this story goes a lot deeper. So in today's video, I want to help explain exactly what's going on, how this will affect gas prices, and how this will affect the stock market and investors. So if that sounds interesting, let's get right into it. Hi, my name is Andrei Jikh. Hope you're doing well. Come for the finance and stay for the story time because this fist bump hits way different now. So the energy crisis has officially started over 100 years ago because the story of oil, or black gold as some people call it, goes all the way back to 1846 when the world started to heavily rely on it. Now, we're not going to go back that far because the real question is who actually gets to control the real price of oil? And the answer to that question, like everything else, is supposed to be supply and demand and the free market. But the truth is, supply and demand within oil is just an illusion. And here's why. The demand for oil is what economists like to call inelastic. And that means the world needs about the same amount of oil every single day and it doesn't really change, which means the real way to control the price of oil is not through demand, but through the supply. More specifically, price stability. And the way to get price stability is through something called spare production capacity, which is a measure of how fast an oil producer can ramp up or slow down excess oil production in 30 days. Because it's the country that can make more than it needs that gets to stabilize the price and therefore control it. And one of the countries that has that power is Saudi Arabia. That's because they're able to produce more than 2 million barrels per day than they actually need. Now, the real question is, how is it that they can do that, but the US can't? That's because their oil is what's called nationalized, which means it's their governments that get to produce and make the profits from selling oil without any competition from their free market because they don't have one. The US oil is what's called privatized because it's private companies that produce the oil and make the profits, which means shareholders would never agree to spending more money today to build up excess inventory to suppress the price in the future. That doesn't make economic sense, nor does it make sense to try to pump the price because then a competitor would come along and offer their oil for cheaper. And that's exactly why, even though the US is the #1 producing country in the world when it comes to oil, it can't stabilize the price with the exception of using SPR. It's kind of like basic budgeting. It's not the person who makes the most amount of money, it's the person who gets to keep the most amount of money. That's exactly why some countries get to keep more of their oil than others. And that's where OPEC comes in. And this started a global game of chess because by 1961, 5 powerful oil-producing countries got together to create what's called OPEC, which stands for Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. And those countries were Iraq, Iran, Kuwait, Venezuela, and Saudi Arabia. Now, they added more and more countries to this list as time went on with the goal of stabilizing global oil prices. But you can think of OPEC for oil what De Beers was for the diamond industry, a cartel which artificially pumped the price of oil higher by suppressing the supply. Now, by 1971, Richard Nixon took the US dollar off the gold standard, and that meant the value of gold went way up and the value of the dollar went way down. And that really hurt OPEC because their governments were dependent on the value of the petrodollar because their oil was priced in dollars. Remember, it had to be after the Bretton Woods Agreement, which made them price their oil only in dollars. Now, this obviously upset OPEC, which is why by October 19, 1973, OPEC placed a ban hammer on the US and put what's called an oil embargo. And this meant that they would stop giving oil to the US, and as soon as the embargo happened, the price of oil doubled in almost a month, inflation went way up, people started to lose their jobs, and the US went into a deep recession. Now, by 1974, even though the oil embargo was lifted, the price of oil in the US wouldn't actually start going down until about 10 years later. Remember, one of the ways to control oil prices is to have excess supply. That's why by December 1975, the US created what's called the SPR, the Strategic Petroleum Reserves, which was supposed to give the US access to roughly 90 days worth of oil in the case of an emergency or another oil embargo. That's why the SPR is so important today. And that's why, since about 1984, the SPR has never had lower than 450 million barrels of oil until just recently when we dipped below that level for the first time in 40 years. And the reason for that is because on March 31st of this year, the president announced a plan to release 1 million barrels of oil per day for the next 6 months, in addition to the 10 million barrels he just recently asked for. So this is very controversial, but that's how we got here. Now, the SPR is not the real reason why oil prices are going higher. Here is the debate on why this is actually happening. Here's the LE5 version. OPEC, along with 10 other oil-producing countries, which were led by Russia, got together to strategically cut the production of 2 million barrels of oil per day. And this obviously really upset the US because now the US is accusing those countries of working together to manipulate prices, hurt elections, and of course to help Russia. Now, Saudi Arabia, one of the leaders of OPEC, basically responded by saying, "This is not about you. We're not trying to team up with anyone. We're just trying to get ahead of these interest rate increases, which is going to hurt the global economy and send it into a recession. If the US wants cheaper oil, they should build more refineries." And the US was like, Pikachu face. That's also why you might have heard of something called NOPEC, the No Oil Producing and Exporting Cartels Act, and this would give Congress the ability to sue OPEC for trying to monopolize oil prices. Now, the way they plan to do this is by changing something called the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890, which was the same thing that was used to break up John Rockefeller's oil monopoly way back when. And this bill actually has support on both sides, but critics of this bill, which are mostly the oil and the energy companies, say it risks upsetting OPEC even more, and that could destabilize prices and make oil even more expensive. But the people who don't buy that argument say, you're just saying that because you don't want oil to exist in a free market, because that means it would be cheaper and therefore you get to make less money. Either way, that's the conversation, but the more important question is, how does this affect our portfolio? Here's a couple interesting things, because energy stocks this year have been the real winners because they directly benefit from higher cost of commodities like oil. Energy stocks like ExxonMobil, for example, have been crushing the stock market, up almost 60% year to date. Now, believe it or not, historically speaking, data shows that there is very little correlation between gas prices and the stock market and the global economy until now. There's a huge indirect link because remember, the Federal Reserve likes to base their interest rate decisions on inflation, or the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, which measures inflation. And when gas prices go up and they go higher, that means we get a higher CPI number, higher inflation, which means higher interest rates to fight said inflation. When that happens, the cost of mortgages and the cost of borrowing money goes up, and that means less money in consumer pockets to invest. And because higher gas prices means higher inflation for longer is why it gives the Fed more reason to raise rates at their next meeting on November 2nd. Now, normally, this kind of a correlation between oil prices and the stock market is not supposed to exist in a healthy economy where inflation's at 2%, but unfortunately for now, That's the reason. Now, there's a second reason why the stock market is falling, and that's because of the jobs report. Recently, the economy added 236,000 jobs, which normally is supposed to be a good thing. But right now, the stock market sees this as a bad thing because, again, it gives more reason to the Fed to raise rates because it sees the economy as being too hot and it needs to slow it down by raising those rates, which obviously hurts everyone. So those are the two reasons why the stock market is falling. And if you made it this far into the video, you're a nerd and I like you. Now let me give you my personal thoughts about everything that's going on. Just to preface, I'm not taking sides, so please don't hurt me because this is a very politically charged problem. And depending on where you draw the line in the sand, you could point the finger at someone else. For example, right now, the Republicans blame the Democrats for using precious oil reserves as a virtue signal to keep oil prices down in order to get reelected. If the administration cared so much about going green and being sustainable, then why would they use the reserves at all? The election is not an emergency, and that's a fair point. Now, the Democrats blame the Republicans for living in the past and being harmful to the environment and prioritizing loose regulation for corporate profits and politicizing a problem that is technically bigger than the president. That's just the stuff we accuse each other of inside the US, but what if we thought about it outside the box on a global level? You could say that it's not the US's fault that OPEC is a greedy cartel that wants to artificially boost the price of oil to make themselves and their allies richer, but greed aside, a more compassionate point of view might be maybe rising interest rates does hurt their economy and maybe they are preparing for a global recession. Now, another point of view might be, what if they're seeing arguing in the US in the elections as a sign of weakness and they're taking advantage of an opportunity to challenge decades and decades of policy that allowed the US to remain a global power with the world reserve currency and the petrodollar. And that's why Saudi Arabia, China, and Russia are teaming up right now. A more tough love point of view might be, maybe we should accept responsibility in our role in this story and finally use this as an opportunity to become energy independent. Either way, I'm not saying that any of that is right. I'm just trying to say that this insanely complicated story has characters that are a lot more nuanced than good versus bad or left versus right like the internet likes to make it seem. So instead of looking at it from the lens of the political process, I look at it from the lens of money and control. Oil, for example, is a commodity that represents energy, which represents control. Those who have energy have control, and those who have money have power and control. And that has historically belonged in the hands of powerful corporations, which have used this resource to buy the political process and the votes necessary to keep themselves in power. And those in power have always voted to keep the status quo, even when it meant sacrificing the progress of becoming less dependent on the thing that enriched shareholders and made us money, but ended up becoming the thing that harmed us. Now, the obvious thing to have done was to become less dependent on oil way back in the 70s, but the progress has been slow and now it's catching up to us. So regardless of what you call it, whether it's bribing or lobbying, this is the kind of thing that happens not just in the US, but all over the world. And the political process for now is just a distraction of left versus right, because the real winners of this story are those who make money profiting from this resource. And if we want that to change, we need to find a way to make money from another resource or find a way to get rid of money as a tool for political influence, aka get rid of lobbying. For now though, I think the American people have always wanted what's best for the US and for our future, and I don't even think we disagree on how to get there. It's just we're constantly distracted by the short-term political process and the elections, and I guess I don't know the right answer or what I'm really trying to say other than this was a complicated YouTube video, it's a complicated situation, and I hope the market picks up again, we print some tendies, have a good retirement, and all get along again. As always, I'd love to know your thoughts. I know I left out so many details and I oversimplified, otherwise this would have been a 12-hour long documentary, but in the meantime, I hope you learned something new, and as always, have a wonderful rest of your day. Smash the like button, subscribe if you haven't already. Don't forget to grab up to $250 worth of free Bitcoin right here. Keep it offline, keep it somewhere else, grab your free stocks, links are down below, and then go track them automatically with the spreadsheet linked down below in my Patreon. Love you. Thank you so much for watching this video. I'll see you back here on Monday, Friday, sometimes a Wednesday. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.